Hi Cubs, I'm here today with chapter 11 of our favorite book, Matilda. Okay, this chapter is called Bruce Bogtrotter and the Cake. How can she get away with it? Lavender said to Matilda. Surely the children go home and tell their mothers and fathers. I know my father would raise a terrific stink if I told him the headmistress had grabbed me by the hair and slung me over the playground fence. No, he wouldn't, Matilda said, and I'll tell you why. He simply wouldn't believe you. Of course he would. He wouldn't, Matilda said, and the reason is obvious. Your story would sound too ridiculous to be believed, and that is the Trunchbull's great secret. What is? Lavender said. Matilda said, never do anything by halves if you want to get away with it. Be outrageous. Go the whole hog. Make sure everything you do is so completely crazy, it's unbelievable. No parent is going to believe this pigtail story, not in a million years. Mine wouldn't. They'd call me a liar. In that case, Lavender said, Amanda's mother isn't going to cut her pigtails off. No, she isn't, Matilda said. Amanda will do it herself. You see if she doesn't. Do you think she's mad? Lavender asked. Who? The Trunchbull. No, I don't think she's mad, Matilda said, but she's very dangerous. Being in this school is like being in a cage with a cobra. You have to be very fast on your feet. They got another example of how dangerous the headmistress could be the very next day. During lunch, an announcement was made that the whole school should go into the assembly hall and be seated as soon as the meal was over. When all 250 or so boys and girls were settled down in assembly, the Trunchbull marched onto the platform. None of the other teachers came in with her. She was carrying a riding crop in her right hand. She stood up there on center stage in her green breeches with legs apart. Oh my goodness, you made me a card? Thank you, Shar. Should I open them right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Why don't you open the cards?
Mommy.
Thank you.
It's gonna be on YouTube.
Oh, you want to come here? Sit on my lap while I open my card. Oh my goodness, it has a little doggy on it. It says, it's an extra hug and kisses kind of day. Happy Mother's Day. Love, Daddy. Aww. Thanks, Daddy. And I have another card. Who could this be from? Oh my gosh, what is that?
Flamingo.
It's a flamingo. What is she wearing on her head?
A hat.
And shades? It says, oh, Happy Mother's Day. Love, Charlotte.
Hey,
Aw.
Shar, what's that, Shar?
Seahorse.
That's a seahorse.
Oh my gosh, it's beautiful.
And what's that?
That's just a seahorse.
A seahorse? You made a seahorse for
Aw.
Mommy? That's so sweet.
Thank you, honey. Thank you, Daddy. Thank you so much. I love my cards.
Hey, say Happy Mother's Day, Mommy.
Happy Mother's Day, Mommy.
Thank you, Shar Shar. Have a good nap.
Go now.
Love you. What a sweet little surprise. Okay. So 250 boys and girls came down into assembly. Trunchbull marched onto the platform. None of the other teachers came in with her. She was carrying a riding crop in her right hand. She stood up there on center stage in her green breeches with legs apart and riding crop in her hand. What's going to happen? I don't know, Matilda whispered back. The whole school waited for what was coming next. Bruce Bogtrotter, the Trunchbull barked suddenly. Where is Bruce Bogtrotter? A hand shot up among the seated children. Come up here, the Trunchbull shouted. An 11-year-old boy who was decidedly large and round stood up and waddled briskly forward. He climbed up onto the platform. Stand over there, the Trunchbull ordered. The boy stood on one side. He looked nervous. He knew very well he wasn't up there to be presented with a prize. He was watching the headmistress with an exceedingly wary eye as he kept edging farther and farther away from her with little shuffles of his feet, rather as a rat might edge away from a terrier that is watching it from across the room. His plump, flabby face had turned gray with fearful apprehension. His stockings hung about his ankles. "This clot," boomed the headmistress. "Who, me?" Bruce said, looking puzzled. "A thief, a crook, a pirate, a rustler." "Steady on," the boy said. Dash it all, headmistress. Do you deny it, you miserable little gumboil? Do you plead not guilty?" "I don't know what you're talking about," the boy said. "I'll tell you what I'm talking about, you suppurating little blister," the Trunchbull shouted. "Yesterday morning during break, you snuck like a serpent into the kitchen and stole a piece of my private chocolate cake from my tea tray. That tray had just been prepared for me personally by the cook. It was my morning snack. And as for the cake, it was my own private stock. That was not boy's cake. You don't think for 1 minute I'm going to eat the filth I gave you. That cake was made from real butter and real cream. And he, that robber bandit, that safe cracker, that highwayman standing over there with his socks around his ankles, stole it and ate it." "I never did," the boy said. "Don't lie to me, Bog Trotter," barked the Trunchbull. "The cook saw you. What's more is she saw you eating it." The Trunchbull paused to wipe a fleck of froth from her lips. When she spoke again, her voice was suddenly softer, quieter, more friendly, and she leaned toward the boy, smiling. "You like my special chocolate cake? It's rich and delicious. It's very good." "You're right," the Trunchbull said. "It is very good. Therefore, I think you should congratulate the cook. When a gentleman has a particularly good meal, he always sends his compliments to the chef. You didn't know that, did you, Bog Trotter? But those who inhabit the criminal underworld are not noted for their good manners." The boy remained silent. "Cook!" the Trunchbull shouted. "Come here, cook." The cook, a tall, shriveled female who looked as though all of her body juices had been dried out of her long ago in a hot oven, walked onto the platform wearing a dirty white apron. Her entrance had clearly been arranged beforehand by the headmistress. "Now then, Bog Trotter," the Trunchbull boomed, "tell cook what you think of her chocolate cake." "Very good," the boy mumbled. You could see he was now beginning to wonder what this was leading up to. The only thing he knew for certain was that the law forbade the Trunchbull to hit him with that riding crop that she kept smacking against her thigh. That was some comfort, but not much, because the Trunchbull was totally unpredictable. One never knew what she was going to do next. "There you are, cook," the Trunchbull cried. "Bog Trotter likes your cake. He adores your cake. Do you have any more of your cake you could give him?" "I do indeed," the cook said. She seemed to have learned her lines by heart. "Then go and get it. Bring a knife to cut it with." The cook disappeared. Almost at once she was back again, staggering under the weight of an enormous round chocolate cake on a china platter. The cake was fully 18 inches in diameter, and it was covered with dark brown chocolate icing. "Put it on the table," Trunchbull said. There was a small table center stage with a chair behind it. The cook placed the cake carefully on the table. "Sit down, Bog Trotter," the Trunchbull said. "Sit there." The boy moved cautiously to the table and sat down. He stared at the gigantic cake. "There you are, Bog Trotter," the Trunchbull said, and once again her voice became soft, persuasive, and gentle. "It's all for you, every bit of it." "Well, thank you," the boy said. "Thank cook." "Not me," said Trunchbull. "Thank you, cook," the boy said. The cook stood there like a shriveled bootlace, tight-lipped, implacable, disapproving. She looked as though her mouth was full of lemon juice. "Come on, then," said Trunchbull. "Why don't you cut yourself a nice thick slice and try it?" "What? Now?" the boy said, cautious. "Can I take it home instead?" "That would be impolite," said the Trunchbull. "Go on, get on with it," the Trunchbull said. "Cut a slice and taste it. We haven't got all day." The boy picked up the knife and was about to cut into the cake when he stopped. He stared at the cake. Then he looked at the Trunchbull. Then the tall, stringy cook with her lemon juice mouth. All the children in the hall were watching tensely, waiting for something to happen. They felt certain it must. The Trunchbull was not a person who would give someone a whole chocolate cake to eat just out of kindness. Many were guessing that it had been filled with pepper or castor oil or some other foul-tasting substance that would make the boy violently sick. It might even be arsenic, and he would be dead in 10 seconds flat. Or perhaps it was booby-trapped cake, and the whole thing would blow up in the moment it was cut. "I don't want to eat it," the boy said. "Taste it, you little brat," said Trunchbull. "You're insulting the cook." Very gingerly, the boy began to cut a thin slice of cake. Then he levered the slice out. He slowly began to eat it. "It's good, isn't it?" the Trunchbull asked. "Very good," the boy said. He finished the slice. "Have another." "That's enough, thank you," the boy murmured. "I said, have another," said Trunchbull. "Eat another slice. Do as you are told." "I don't want another slice," the boy said. Suddenly the Trunchbull exploded. "Eat!" she shouted, banging her thigh with the riding crop. "If I tell you to eat, you will eat. You wanted cake, you stole cake, and now you've got cake. What's more, you're going to eat it. You do not leave this platform, and nobody leaves this hall until you have eaten the entire cake. Do I make myself clear?" The boy looked at Trunchbull, then he looked down at the cake. "Eat, eat, eat!" Very slowly, the boy cut himself another slice. Matilda was fascinated. "Do you think he can do it?" she whispered to Lavender. "No, Lavender," whispered back. "It's impossible. He'll be sick before he's halfway through it." The boy ate the second slice, and he cut a third slice and started to eat it. He finished this one quicker than the other two, and when he was done, he immediately picked up the knife and cut the next. He was actually getting into stride. Matilda watched closely, and there was no sign of distress in the boy. "He's doing well," she whispered to Lavender. "He'll be sick soon," Lavender whispered back. "It's going to be horrid." When Bruce Bogtrotter had eaten his way through half of the enormous cake, he paused for just a couple of seconds and took several deep breaths. The Trunchbull stood with hands on her hips and said, "Get on with it." Suddenly, the boy let out a gigantic belch which rolled around the assembly hall like thunder. Many of the audience began to giggle. "Silence!" shouted the Trunchbull. The boy cut himself another thick slice and started eating it fast. There were still no signs of flagging or giving up. He certainly did not look as though he was about to stop and cry out, "I can't eat it anymore. I'm going to be sick." He was still in the running. And now a subtle change was coming over the 250 watching children in the audience. Earlier on, they had sensed impending disaster. They had prepared themselves for an unpleasant scene in which the wretched boy stuffed the gills with chocolate cake. Now he kept eating it. Then someone shouted, "Come on, Brucey, you can make it."
Hello, Mommy.
"Hello, Charlotte." The Trunchbull wheeled around and yelled, "Silence!" The audience watched intently. They were thoroughly caught up in the contest. "I think he's going to make it," Matilda said. "I think so too," Lavender whispered back. The boy was slowing down. There was no doubt about that, but he kept pushing the stuff into his mouth with the dogged perseverance of a long-distance runner who had sighted the finish line and knew he must keep going. As the very last mouthful disappeared, a tremendous cheer rose up from the audience, and children were leaping onto their chairs and yelling and clapping and shouting. "Well done, Brucey! Good for you! You won the gold medal, Brucey!" The Trunchbull stood motionless on the platform. Her great horsey face had turned the color of molten lava, and her eyes were glittering with fury. She glared at Bruce Bogtrotter, who was sitting on his chair like some huge, overstuffed grub, replete, comatose, unable to move or to speak. A fine sweat was beating his forehead, but there was a grin of triumph on his face. Suddenly, the Trunchbull lunged forward and grabbed the large empty china platter on which the cake had rested. She raised it high in the air and brought it down with a crash right on the top of the wretched bruised bog-trotter's head, and pieces flew all over the platform. The boy was by now so full of cake he was like a sack full of wet cement, and you couldn't have hurt him with a sledgehammer. He simply shook his head a few times and went on grinning. "Go to blazes," screamed the Trunchbull, and she marched off the platform, followed closely by the cook. That's the end of chapter 11, boys and girls. Thanks for joining me for story time.